Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. I have such an exciting wrap up for you guys. I'm so excited because a lot of these books I haven't talked about on my channel. Like some of them I definitely have because I did the Fairy Loot vlog, so a lot of these books were in the Fairy Loot vlog. But other than that, I really didn't do that many vlogs. I actually scrapped a read what I want to read kind of vlog because it was a mess. It was a mess, which probably would have been entertaining, but with those types, I like to have B-roll. I like to do that stuff, and I just didn't do any of that. It was just a lot of rambling, and then I finished books and never talked about them. So I scrapped a week in the life of a mood reader. That's kind of, I've done it before. It was fun, and I was like, oh, let's just do it again, and it didn't happen. Didn't happen. It was because I also was in a flare-up. So when I'm in a flare-up, things don't happen. They just don't. But I have read so many books this month. I've read so many books, but I've also had more DNFs this month, than I've had in a really long time, which I think is why this reading month was so good. I just didn't take any crap from any book that I was reading except for one. There is a 1-star on this list. Don't have many 1-stars, but I finally found a 1-star that I feel very strongly about. So this month I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 books. If you're not, because I know some people don't count graphic novels as a full book, even though I still think it counts, 10 books and a graphic novel. And they were all so good. They were all so good, except for the one. And then for DNFs, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 DNFs. I had 7 DNFs. If you take all the pages read from the DNFs, it would have been like 2 more books. But I'm so happy because I feel like I had the most amazing reading month I've had in months, like probably since last year. That's how good it was. So excited. I had 3 5-stars. 3. No, wait. I had 4. I had 4 5-stars. I had 4, and so good. So good. And it's like, these are the 5-stars like from this month, or like my favorite 5-stars of the whole year. So very, very exciting. But we're going to start with the DNFs. We're going to start with the DNFs. And as I've said before, my rules with DNFs is they're not necessarily bad books. I try to get through about at least 50 pages. That's when I count a DNF as 50 pages or more. Normally I get to about 100 pages, and it's just not for me. So some of these I may think are for some other people. I will give recommendations who I think should read them, and if I don't think anybody should read them. So let's get into the DNFs. First, the DNFs that I don't have physically, because I do have some books that I don't have physically, obviously. I try to get through a lot of my arcs this month, which is where a lot of the DNFs are. I know a lot of people have feelings about DNFing arcs, but to me, as long as you leave a review about why it was DNF'd, why it wasn't for you, it's fine, because it's still a review for an arc and for the company. Like, hey, this is why I didn't like this, and this is why I wouldn't have picked it up. So to me, it's still at least a review. So that's why I don't feel bad about DNFing them. I used to, I just don't anymore. Okay, so the first one, oh man, I was really sad because I actually started this on the cruise, and I was so excited. It was gonna be my Summerween book because I just didn't have enough time to read for Summerween. So I was gonna read this as a short story collection, Out There Screaming by Jordan Peele. I am so upset because I'm such a big horror movie person, and Jordan Peele is like, Get Out is so good that I was just like, yes, Out There Screaming, it's gonna be so good. I didn't like it. I just don't think short story collections are for me. I feel like a lot of them just like went over my head. It was all horror short stories, and a lot of them had ambiguous endings, and I don't like that. I don't like ambiguous endings. So after I read 200 pages of the book, and after that point, I was just like, I haven't liked a single story in here. And I don't like them. I just don't. So I'm gonna DNF it. So that was really, really disappointing, especially because I read from authors I actually liked, and I didn't like their stories in that either. So I just think that with the ambiguous ending and me being very picky about my horror books, it was just a recipe for disaster, unfortunately. Oh man, yeah, I feel like I'm just done with short story collections and anthologies. There's only one series that I will do. I'll probably still continue with the young adult ones just because my brain can comprehend them. But for some reason, every time I've picked up an adult short story collection, I have not liked it. So I've got to be really picky about the short story collections I pick up. Next, we have an ARC DNF, sadly. I do believe this one is coming out, either it just came out or it's coming out early in August. Oh man, Death at Morning House. I was really excited to read this. I thought this would be so good, and it's the same author as the Truly Devious series, which I haven't read, but I have the first book, which now makes me nervous. I just did not like the... it was weird. It was weird. Our main character is having a string of bad luck. She ends up burning a house down. That's not a surprise. And her parents suggest, and I think one of her teachers suggests that she leaves town and goes to work at this like historical house a little bit away from their hometown, where she can kind of get away from the rumors and stuff that's going on, and basically just do tours and take care of this old house for a summer job, since she lost her job, and give her something to do instead of just wallowing. So the point of this house is it was built by this like really strange guy, and it ends up 2 members of the family died at the house. And the family had like a bunch of weird deaths after that point as well. So it's interesting. It's a young adult mystery thriller. And I thought it was going to be so good. I thought it was going to be so good. But there's 2 different timelines. One in the present day where we're following our main character. And then one in the past where you're following a girl about the same age that's one of the daughters of the family. And I loved the past. It was written so well. It was so smooth. It was just very enjoyable to read, and I love the storyline in the past. The second it jumps to the present, it's like the cringiest like comedy writing, and it just felt so young. Like it read so incredibly young, which I feel like, I mean, she obviously did that to differentiate between the 2 perspectives, but I just didn't like it. I really did not like our main character, and I didn't like the jokes that were written into the book, and it just got so cringy. And I think I read about 100 pages, and really nothing happened in those 100 pages. It was mostly just the awful jokes and meeting friends, and it was just not fun. It wasn't fun to read, and that's kind of my thing, is if I'm not having a fun time reading, I gotta stop. It had potential. It had potential for me to really like it, and it just unfortunately was not it. And I'm starting to think that I don't like young adult mystery anymore, which makes me sad. But I haven't really enjoyed that much adult mystery this year either. So maybe this year is just not the year for mystery and thriller, which is really sad to me, because that's normally what I really, really like reading. That and fantasy are like my top 2. So that is a highly unfortunate development that has happened. Yeah, that was a DNF. I do think people who enjoy young adult mystery are going to like it, as long as you can kind of see past some cheesy, awful jokes. Just awful jokes. And then to kind of drive the point home, well, see, this one was really upsetting. This one was incredibly, incredibly upsetting, because I loved this author's debut. And I was so excited to read their second book. Their debut was, what was it called? These Vicious Games? These Vicious something? I don't remember what it was called, but it was, I'll put it down below. It was so good. It was so much fun. I absolutely loved it. So I ended up getting an arc of their second book that comes out relatively soon. And it's called The Blonde Dies First. And I was like, yes, this is gonna be so good. This one's a horror thriller. The first one that I read was more thriller mystery. So this could be really, really good. It was one of the most unbearable main characters that I've ever read. I could not stand the main character. She was an awful friend, just a pain in the butt, complained about everything, was just miserable as a person, and seemed like if she was miserable, she wanted everyone else to be miserable, and just not a very good friend at all. And then the friend group also just sucked. It really was one of those friend groups where you're like, why are you friends? Like, you don't even like each other. Like, that's what the vibes it gave, and I don't like that. I don't like the trope of like just being friends because you've known each other for forever. I want you to actually like each other. I want you to actually like enjoy doing things together. That was incredibly frustrating, which is sad because I think the premise was really, really cool. It's following our main character who, it's the blonde dies first because the joke is the black person dies first in horror movies. And the blonde dies first is because that's also a trope, is the blonde dies first. So she dyes her hair blonde, and that's how she's had it dyed for a really long time. And so not only is she blonde, she's also black. And it's just like, oh no, this is a horror book. And so it's kind of, there's a demon chasing them after a session that they do a Ouija board stuff in. So it's such a good premise, but if I can't stand the characters within 100 pages, I'm not going to read another 250 pages for the rest of the book. I am just not going to do it. So I'm really hoping, and maybe it's because it's horror, and again, like I said, I'm so picky about my horror books. I'm hoping that this author goes back to writing thriller mystery as their next book, and I'll pick that one up, and hopefully I'll like it better. Because so disappointed, so upset about that one because of how much I like that first book. That was everything I DNF'd. Electronically, Kindle-y, I don't know. Moving on to the books that I DNF'd physically. First up, we have God Killer. I did not like this. This is following our main character who literally hunts gods. That's the kind of the purpose of this. But it's like 6 main characters, I think. No, that is too many characters. That is so many characters. If it gets over 2, I start getting peeved. If we're over 3, I'm done. Like, I'm not interested. I don't like that many main characters. So I was not a fan. I didn't even like the writing style of this either. So this one, I just really didn't like this one, sadly. Next up, we have, I'm sad about this. Nectar of the Wicked. I should have known this was not going to be for me. But so many people are like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. I read up until the first sex scene, which happened within like 20 pages. And I was like, nope, this is all smut. This is just smut. Not interested. I like romantasy if it's more plot than smut. Like, I'm cool with just romance constantly being like put throughout the book, but I don't want it to just be graphic smut every 20 pages. And that's definitely what this is. So I'm thinking, this is kind of what is making me think I'm gonna cancel my Fairy Loot Romantasy subscription. I'm gonna use my skips up because there are a couple that I wanted to run in the Holly Library, so I got that one. And I wanted Lore of the Wilds, the first one. So I'm gonna use my skips until I run out, and then I'm gonna cancel because this is just not my vibe, and I have a feeling that's the vibe of the book box. So yeah, this was not it. I think this is following, I don't even remember because the plot was lacking. I think it's a girl who is at least part fae, and she lives in like the middle realm, and she's trying to get to the Faelands because she was a changeling. And that's all that it was, and the plot's not what's important, I don't think. At least the first 20 pages. Oh, next up, I'm actually going to talk about this one first. I'm going to talk about the last one, the big one last. But I DNF Babel. It's not really that big of a surprise. This definitely was Secret History, the Atlas 6 coded. Hated both of them. I hated both of them. I wanted this to be more not that. I don't even know. I'm starting to think I just don't like dark academia, which I think I like young adult dark academia. I potentially don't like adult dark academia because it's always so painfully pretentious. It's so pretentious. And I like some pretentious things. Not this. Not this, not the Secret History, not the Atlas 6. Oh man, it was painful. This book was painful. And again, there's a bunch of, I actually like the beginning. I will say that. I like the beginning of the book. I read probably 150 pages, 100 pages. I really liked the beginning. The second they got to Oxford is where it lost me, where I became completely uninterested. Again, didn't like the friend group that we were introduced to. They all suck. They're all just miserable and they like to point out flaws in everybody. And I just really, really didn't like it. Like the second, his like friend that he makes is constantly correcting him on things and making like, well, I know this, and I'm just like, oh my God, I hate this. So no, this was a DNF. I'm not gonna read this much. I'm just not gonna do that. I'm not gonna put myself through that. And Babel is just a book about translation. That's what the book's about. So anyway, the big DNF of this month, Blood and Honey. I finally did it. I finally DNF'd the series, and it's sad because I also have the third one because I bought them not thinking I would not like this one. And as usual, I read the first one, gave Serpent and Dove 5-star, and then Blood and Honey came out and I was like, oh, let's get Blood and Honey, bought it. And then I was like, I don't want to continue the series because I'm nervous. So then I bought this one, this came out. And then I started this when I bought this and I was like, oh, this is not good. So then I just put it down because I didn't want to DNF it. And then I was like, these are just sitting here and they're chunky books. I gotta get rid of them. They're taking up so much space on the shelves. And so I finally started reading this from the beginning again, and I tried and I hated it. It was so boring. And I read reviews and like what happens, and I'm just like, and then I read reviews of what happens in this one, and again, it's apparently nothing happens for the first like 500 pages. And it's like the last 50 pages are good. So I'm just like, not doing it. I'm not. There are so many other books that I want to read that are not this. So I am keeping my copy of Serpent and Dove because Serpent and Dove absolutely loved it. And I'm just going to pretend it's a standalone. I'm just going to pretend it's a standalone because I am not putting myself through this. These are so chunky. If they weren't that chunky, I would think about it. I would really think about forcing myself to read all of them, but they're too big. They're too big and I don't want to read them. So we are going to start from lowest rated to highest because I actually have a lot of highly rated books. So it's very exciting. And I think I only have one star, I believe. I'm looking through it. I do have a 2-star, and then everything's 3 or up after that. So that is very exciting. So the 1-star. Yeah. Incidents around the house. I was very excited about this. I was very, very excited about this. I have not read a Josh Malerman. This was my first Josh Malerman. I loved 50% of this book. I would have given the first 50% a 5-star. I was freaked out. This is the scariest book that I've ever read. I was terrified for the first half of this book. Second half of the book, utter garbage. Utter garbage. I can see horror readers loving this. This is not it for me. I like not happily ever. I mean, I like happily ever afters. I want something to be able to hold on to where my hope can live. And this was depressing. This was so freaking depressing. It's following our main character, Bella, who's gonna rub a lot of people the wrong way because she is young. It is told from a child's perspective, which I thought was gonna be a problem, but it's actually what made it really scary because she was who was describing things to us, and you can only see like people's reactions to how she's describing things and what she's saying, and it's like, this is terrifying. This is actually terrifying. Like when she's describing this thing slithering along her floor and how it's like peeking out at her. And I was like, nope, nope. I was terrified in my closet for like a week after reading this. And while I was reading, the power went out, me home alone while I was reading this. And I called my mom. I was like, help, help me. I'm about to drive 2.5 hours to your house if my husband doesn't get home soon. She was laughing at me. She thought it was funny. But yeah, so it's following her, and she has this friend called Other Mommy, and it keeps asking her if it would let her, if she would let it into her heart. And it's a lot about family drama and things going on behind the scenes, and you see like kind of a family falling apart through the eyes of a child. So I loved all that. I loved all that. And then the ending, and it did drag a little bit. This actually could have probably been a novella. This would have been really good as a novella. This didn't need to be as long as it was. It just didn't. It repeated a lot of stuff once the 50% mark was passed through, because they were just trying to run from it for like 150 pages. So this should have been a novella. I think if it was a novella, even with that ending, I would have probably given it at least a 3. So that's kind of my critique of this. But yeah, the ending pissed me off. So this is a 1 star. This might be going on my worst books list. It might not though, because of how much I love the first half, but I could not give it more than a 1 star for how just awful that ending was. The 2 star was the graphic novel called We Called Them Giants. And this had a lot of interesting ideas to it, but it was just not fleshed out whatsoever. So this is following our main characters who are living in a post-apocalyptic world where there's almost been like a rapture situation that's happened. A bunch of the world population has disappeared and they were some of the few that were left behind. And then these like alien giants crash land on the planet, and that's kind of where it goes from there, is surviving and figuring out what these things want. The problem is you never had any type of backstory about what they were. Like, you never learned what they were. You never learned what they wanted. You never learned about the rapture. You didn't learn about anything. And so it was just really frustrating. And again, this was depressing at the end. This was just a incredibly depressing book. I was not a fan. If there had been more explanations for things and giving you a little bit more understanding, a little more backstory, it could have been higher, could have been a 3, but due to the depressing end of this and just the lack of understanding, the lack of knowledge, it definitely ended up being a 2. Okay, that was the 1 and 2 stars. I know, right? It was such a good reading. So next up we read The Wilds. This was a 3 star. This was fine. I really liked the ending of this one. This one had a really, really good ending. This is the 3rd book in the Sanatorium series. So it's the Sanatorium, the Retreat, and now The Wilds. This is a series I'm reading with my mom, and we kind of had the same thoughts about this one. I think she gave it a 4 because she really liked the ending, but nothing really happened in this. We're following the same detective as the previous 2, Ellen or Elin. I don't know if they say Ellen or Elin, but yeah, it's following the same character as the first 2 books, and she is on a hiking trip with her brother, and they come across a missing persons case. So I liked it, but it was incredibly boring. That was the problem. So the issue with the Sanatorium, so I loved the Sanatorium. I gave the Sanatorium 4 stars, I think. Really, really liked the Sanatorium. The Retreat was so convoluted. It was so convoluted. My mom and I talked about it. It was hard to follow along what was happening, and I think that's what a lot of the reviews said. So for this one, it's like she went the opposite direction. Like, instead of convoluted, she went just like streamlined story, kind of obvious about what happens at the end. And I liked it better. I think I liked it about the same as The Retreat. I think I liked it about the same because by taking everything complicated out of the book, it just made it very average. It just made it very average. And the Retreat was so convoluted, it was hard to understand, so that made it annoying, but still kind of entertaining. So they kind of evened out to be the same, but this one was good. I liked the ending of it. It definitely dragged a lot through the middle of the story. Next up, we have the 3.5. I just finished this book. This is the last book that I read in July. Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. This is a 3.5. The ending, oh gosh, this book is just depressing. I have a whole vlog out if you've read it and you want to watch whole spoilers on it. That's the Lazy Book Club pick for July, so go find that video. This book was just so depressing. Like, I normally feel like I have fun with Riley Sager books. Like, normally there's something goofy that potentially happens, or there's like shock value, or just something happens that makes it super interesting and fun to read. This was not fun to read. This was horribly depressing. It's following our main character, I think Ethan, in the present day, and he is part of a missing persons case where his best friend Billy, when he was a kid, disappeared out of the tent right next to him. There was a slash in the tent, Billy disappeared, that's it. So you're trying to figure out what happened to Billy, and Ethan comes home after something has happened in his home life, and he gets immersed back into the case, and it seems like someone or something is antagonizing him about Billy. Knows stuff about their relationship that other people shouldn't know. So it feels the same as the way I felt about The Only One Left. The Only One Left and Middle of the Night are both just so run-of-the-mill thrillers. And that's not what I expect from Riley Sager books. Like, anyone could have slapped their name on this and I would be like, yeah. But like Home Before Dark, House Across the Lake, The Last Time I Lied, Final Girl, all of those scream Riley Sager. These are just so, the last two have just been so generic. And that's not why I read Riley Sager books. So this is a 3.5. I still enjoyed reading it. I read it in one day. I listened to it on audiobook. But yeah, it was just frustrating. And again, depressing. Next up, we have ASAP by Axio. I love this series. This is the second book in the XOXO series. You don't have to read XOXO to read ASAP, but it definitely enriches the experience. Honestly, I would say you probably should read it. You probably should read it because it goes through the history of the band, the K-pop band, and the members and some of the dynamics between them. You don't get all of the dynamics if you don't read the first one. I liked XOXO better, but I really liked ASAP. I gave it a 4-star. It was just a really, really fun book, and it built on what XOXO created, and I really, really liked the main characters in this. I especially liked the male lead. There was a lot of obvious pining from the male lead side, which was so much fun. I loved it. As usual, it's a little bit on the more juvenile side. As usual, there's nothing like outstanding about it. Like, I didn't get any like, oh my gosh, this is amazing from it. Like, kind of like XOXO. It's just like, it's really, really good. It's just not, it's not a 5-star. It's not there, but I still absolutely loved it. Next, I finally read Defend the Dawn, and I am so happy to report that the second book in this series is so much better than the second book in the A Curse So Dark and Lonely series. This series, she learned from what people were saying about the first series and didn't try and make this, like, she didn't try to make our main characters from the first book the villains, because that's what she did in A Curse So Dark and Lonely. She ruined the characters from the first book in the subsequent books, and book 2 was about totally different characters than the first book in that one. So this one followed our same characters from book 1, and it put in one new character, but we already know them pretty well. I really liked this. This was really, really good. I gave it a 4-star. I do think it dragged a little bit, so I guess I'll talk about these at the same time. I ended up giving Defy the Night 4.5 stars, 4.25, I think is what I gave it. I gave it 4.25s, so 4.25. These could have been combined. This could have been a duology, in my opinion. There was a lot of filler in Defend the Dawn. I still really enjoyed it, but there was just, I feel like there was a lot of unnecessary side quest tangents that we kind of went on that we're trying to build to this book, which the first 200 pages of this book just had a lot of miscellaneous extra stuff. So I think this book and the first 200 pages of this book could have combined and made a much stronger second book where we were just in the action most of the time, because we already had so much buildup from the first book. You didn't need that much buildup for stuff to happen in the rest of the series. So I think it could have been I feel like it just should have been 2 500-page books. Like, that's kind of how I feel about it. And it just didn't need to be 2 more books on top of that. But I still really liked it. I definitely have been enjoying duologies, which I have a comment about that later. I really like them. This is continuing, what is the first one? Defy the Night? Yeah, it's continuing Defy the Night, that series, and I finally finished it. Very exciting. It was a really, really good series. I definitely recommend this series over A Curse So Dark and Lonely. We're down to our 5 stars. Like I said, I have 4 5 stars. So the first one we're gonna talk about is The Family Experiment. I loved it. I loved it. I listened to it on an audiobook, which is how I would suggest listening to. There were a million perspectives, but it worked so well because it felt more like you were watching a reality series. If you like reality TV, you should read this. And I just bought the one on, even though I know what happens in the one, I still want to read it because I loved The Family Experiment so much. I just love the writing style. I love the way it was plotted out. I loved everything about it, that I'm very excited to read the one and the Marriage Act because they all combine together in The Family Experiment. So like the one and the Marriage Act are referenced in The Family Experiment. So I was really sad I didn't read those first, but I didn't read the one because I knew what happened in it, but I still want to read it. I do have The Marriage Act on Kindle, so I am very excited to get into those 2 books. This one is literally what it sounds like. It is a family experiment. They have just created children in the VR metaverse that supposedly work basically AI, and they're very human-like. And it is drama. So they pick a bunch of families who want to be involved in the experiment for one reason or another, and you are following, I think it's like 4 families, 4 couples with the child, and they've all got so much drama and things in their past, and it is crazy. This book is crazy. My mouth dropped open multiple times. I could not have guessed anything really that happened in this book. It was so good. So I highly recommend The Family Experiment. It was a very fun time. Definitely audiobook experience. Just keep notes so you can like see who is who, because that took me a while to figure out what family was doing what. Next up, we have Assistant to the Villain. I loved this. I loved this book so much. I was a little sus at the beginning because the humor is a bit cringe, but that ended up being what was so fun about it. I love this. This was so good. This was so good. I'm so excited for Apprentice to the Villain. So Assistant to the Villain is following our main character, Evie. So Evie needs a job and she ends up running into the villain, capital V, and he offers her a job for reasons, and it's just so much fun. So she works, oh God, I made myself look bald. So she works for this villain and just has the time of her life. And it is fun, and the villain is constantly trying to sabotage the king, and it's just a great book. It's such a fun book. It's humorous. There's emotions in it. There's so much pining in this. I don't think that this is romantasy. This is labeled as romantasy. This is done by Red Tower. This isn't romantasy. This is like comedy fantasy. Like there's definitely some romance stuff in this, and it's basically the villain's perspective is romance, but I wouldn't call it romantasy, which is why I feel like some people aren't liking it, because they're picking it up thinking it's romantasy. So yeah, this was an easy 5-star. It was just so much fun, and I cannot wait to get my hands on Apprentice to the Villain, which comes out in a couple of days. I've been scouring the bookstores early to try and find it early, unsuccessfully. Okay, next 5-star we have The Crimson Moth. This was in my Fairy Loot vlog. Loved it. This was so good. This was everything I wanted from a young adult fantasy. This gave me hope in book boxes again. This was just everything. This was everything I wanted. The pining, the true enemies to lovers kind of situation going on. Oh, it was so good. The only problem I had with it was the end was a bit abrupt, and that's what kind of frustrated me a little bit. I feel like the ending was just like, oh, we needed the ending to start a little bit earlier in the book to kind of work up to it a little bit more, instead of it being so sudden and like jarring, because it was definitely jarring. But this is following our main character, Rune, who is a hidden witch, and magic is forbidden in this country, land, city, something like that. And she has a bunch of friends, but she's like the popular one. She is the heiress in the society. Everyone wants to be around her. Everybody wants to marry her, obsessed with her. Secretly, she is the Crimson Moth who is smuggling witches out of this city to safety. And Gideon is her ultimate issue. He is a witch hunter and is also the brother of her best friend. And it's just so good. It's so good. That's all I'm gonna say about it, because it's phenomenal. I loved it. I loved it. Everyone should read this. It's so good. And so excited. This is not my favorite 5-star. My favorite 5-star would be Crimson Moth, but this is a close second. I got an early copy of Rebel Witch. I got an early copy of it. Second book in the Crimson Moth series, and it's just a duology, so the Rebel Witch was the final book in the duology. It's so good. It's so good. Easy 5-star. Such a good follow-up. Oh my gosh. I will say some people are not going to like it because there's a lot of miscommunication in it. A lot of miscommunication. It is... I enjoyed it still because I love the characters and I love the story and I love everything else going on. The miscommunication did get a bit annoying at times. So if you don't like miscommunication as a trope, you might not have a good time in this book because it is constant. But it's a true enemies to lovers story. Like, oh boy, it is so good. And it just starts with a bang. I was worried it was going to start off slow and we'd be meandering and they'd be separated for a long time. Starts with a bang. I was so excited that it was as good as it was. Again, the ending of this one, of The Rebel Witch, it was a little bit abrupt again, but I still enjoyed it, and I did like the ending of The Rebel Witch better than the ending of The Crimson Moth. But I liked the storyline in The Crimson Moth better than all the miscommunication that happened in The Rebel Witch. But it was phenomenal. I loved it. Highly recommend this duology, and I can because I finished the duology, so I know it's good. So anyway, I'm just so hyped that I got an early copy of that. So that is everything that I read in July. It was such a good month. It was such a good reading month. I am so excited about it. I am already reading some interesting things for August. Upcoming in August, I am currently reading this. Don't know how it's gonna go. I'm actually kind of enjoying the second book right now, kind of more than the first book, but that is to be seen because I've heard some things about book 2 and 3, but I didn't like book 1, so maybe I'll like book 2 and 3. Yeah, that is everything I have for you today. I am going to be working on my new TBR video, so that is probably coming out next week. This should be coming out Sunday. Yes, this should be coming out Sunday. Probably my TBR video will be coming out Wednesday then, and then probably all my thoughts about House of Sky and Breath Sunday after that. So very exciting things popping up, and that is everything I have for you today. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you like it if you did enjoy it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet so you don't miss all those future things that I talked about. Make sure you comment down below what you read in July. I love seeing what people read in July and what they liked. If you read any of these, if you're excited to read any of these, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.